Hello, my friend, and welcome to Something for Everybody. My name is Aaron Machbitz, and today is a very, very special solo episode of the podcast because we are celebrating the 4-year anniversary of this show. I'm so lucky, so grateful, so honored to have made it this far with this podcast, with everyone that listens, watches, or supports the show. So thank you very much. I'm going to try to get to the meat of this episode as fast as possible, which will be the most important 4 lessons that I have learned from 4 years of podcasting. But for all of our new listeners and new supporters of this show, I want to give just a quick backstory of how we got here in this moment, doing 2 episodes a week with brand new lighting and backdrop and cameras and all of this stuff that I've tried to upgrade over the last 4 years, because you can go watch episode 1 of this podcast right now. This is episode 265, 4 years of podcasting. You can go watch episode 1 right now and you can see the difference between this episode and that episode, and just the trajectory, the growth, the progression of this podcast. And when I started, didn't know what I was doing. My communication skills were okay because I was a professional wrestler at the time, so I could talk on camera and I could do promos and all of that stuff, but wasn't nearly as good as I am now, and not nearly as good as I'm going to be in 4 years, which is absolutely incredible to know that there's still more growth, improvement to be had, more reach that this show could get. I mean, I truly believe that this show is so undervalued, underwatched, and underviewed. And that doesn't matter because I do it for the love of the game. But I also know that this podcast would have helped me when I was a couple years younger, 10 years younger in high school or in college. And I know it can help a lot of young men and just people overall who are trying to become that greatest version of themselves in best service to the world. So this is the 4-year anniversary show of this podcast. I released what I consider to be my very first episode on June 29th, 2020. This episode drops on June 28th, 2024. So you may be listening or watching it on that exact day or on the following days. So thank you for being here. We've generated a ton of new followers and listeners over the last 4 years, specifically really over the last 6 months. So how we got here, very quick rundown of this. I've done extensive history of this podcast in a lot of previous episodes, specifically when I changed the name of the podcast from Jackson Talks Everybody to Something for Everybody. So if you're really interested in that, go check out some of those previous episodes. But here's a quick rundown. So I used to be a professional wrestler named Jackson Stone, and initially started the podcast as a way to enhance my professional wrestling character, which was a heel at the time, which if you don't know what that means, basically I was portraying a bad guy, an egomaniac, a pretend sort of movie star, lights, camera, Jackson. And so the goal of the podcast would be for me to sit down and interview people, but I only interview them questions pertaining to me. So it'd be like, hey, Jim, what's your favorite Jackson Stone moment? Hey, what's your favorite Jackson Stone move? Hey, what's your favorite Jackson Stone catchphrase? Sort of a tongue-in-cheek little play on my character, pseudo podcast, but only interviewing them about questions to answer about me, to basically talk about how great I am. So that was the initial goal of the podcast, and I thought it was a pretty cool idea to get more content out there to enhance my professional wrestling character on sort of a larger scale than just the audience that I was performing in front of every single week. And then there was a lot of sort of turmoil that happened in the professional wrestling business. I'm not going to go in depth about that. Again, I've talked about it on previous episodes, specifically episode number 6 of the podcast, which I consider to be the very first episode of this podcast. Yeah, the first 5 are still there, but they're sort of in my wrestling character thing, and I didn't want to delete them because I wanted people to see the progression and the trajectory. But episode 6 is really where I talk about why I had to delete a bunch of episodes and where I really wanted to go with this podcast. So the turmoil happens in professional wrestling, and then I had to delete a bunch of episodes, and then I wanted to make the conscious decision to make this podcast more mental health, personal development, and just growth oriented. Now, we've come a long way since then, but that's when I made the initial decision At that time, the podcast was under Jackson Talks Everybody because I was still performing as a professional wrestler. And then about 2 years ago, I switched over to Something for Everybody, which will be the name of this podcast until it no longer exists. But episode number 6 is really the start of this journey that I've been on about trying to create a podcast that creates more love and connection, that gives people deep insights and practical tools and tips to help them enhance their life, the tools and tips that I still need, and still have to work on as I grow in the same path as everyone that's listening or watching. And so then changed the name to Something for Everybody. And initially I started with an episode every other week. Then I went to every week, and now I'm at 2 full episodes every Tuesday and Friday with some short episodes on Thursdays, Sundays, and Mondays. So really you can get content from this podcast 5 days a week, and we post videos on YouTube Tuesday and Friday, obviously, but also Wednesday and Sunday. So there's a lot of content coming from this podcast, as well as you can follow me on all social media platforms and subscribe to the newsletter at aaronmashbitz.com. And if you really love this podcast, you can buy the merchandise at shopforeverybody.com. But so we'll just keep elevating our game. I moved into a new house, so I set up a new studio in my spare bedroom. Shout out Chris Williamson from Modern Wisdom. And so I'm just trying to do the best I can with this podcast as we've grown tremendously over the last 4 years. Still very underplayed, undervalued, and underlistened. But I do this because I love it. And so let's now jump right into the 4 lessons, the 4 I feel most important lessons that I've learned from 4 years of podcasting. Number 1 being consistency. Consistency is something that I've known was very, very important my whole life. I first realized it with baseball. I was a baseball player for a very long time. I played in high school. I was a Division I All-American. Decided not to play professional baseball because I wanted to be a professional wrestler. But baseball was my whole life from age 4 until I was 22 years old. That's consistency. And I didn't feel like until maybe I was 19, 20, and 21 that I was actually any good at the game. So I felt really confident in who I was as a baseball player. And that's consistency, that's deliberate practice over a long period of time. And then I got into professional wrestling. If you're not consistent as a performer, as an entertainer, comedian, whatever it is, people will forget about you. They'll just move on to the next guy. And so you have to be as consistent as possible when you're getting on the road, when you're contacting promotions, when you're training in the ring, training 2 or 3 times a week, wrestling 4 times a week, contacting, emailing, writing to shows, like doing the work to try and be as consistent as possible, to get into as many eyes as possible, and then using social media as the back end tool to try and enhance my character and my performance over a larger audience. And so you have to be as consistent as possible. There is no path to greatness. There is no path to being the best at what you do, whatever that is, if you're not consistent. Consistency, again, does not guarantee success. There's no guarantees in life, but being inconsistent will absolutely guarantee that you won't be successful. So I guess there is a guarantee that if you're not consistent, you will not be successful. You will not get to the place you want to be, or you will not actualize your full potential as a human being on this planet. And so consistency is everything. And so knowing that, but not be able to sort of verbalize like what the trait was that I was after. I just knew that that's what I needed to do in order to be where I wanted to be the best baseball player that I could be, to be the absolute best professional wrestler that I can be now in all my other domains, whether it's my speaking business, my mental performance business, or this podcast. I know that consistent, deliberate action is what will make me the best at those things. I'm not special by any means. I just know that I'm willing to put in the work every single day as my competitive advantage. I only say that not to boost myself up, but to say that you can do the exact same thing. Everyone that you see doing great things, yes, some of them may be a little special, but majority of them, Tom Brady made this speech the other day, majority of them just put in the work a little bit longer than everyone else. They were consistent, they were deliberate, and they were persistent, and they were patient. That was their competitive advantage. And that idea of consistency has been hammered down as the truest thing that I know because of this podcast. You have to be consistent. The only reason that this podcast is in the top 2% of all podcasts in the whole freaking world is that I was consistent. I did what I said I was going to do. I said I was going to release an episode every other week. Did it. I said I was going to release an episode every week. Did it. So now I'm releasing 2 episodes every week. Been doing that for almost 18 months now, or whatever the number might be. Do what you say you're going to do. If this is something that you actually want to do, whatever it is in your life, you can do it. But there has to be, the foundational piece is always going to be consistency. Always. Always, always, always. So find what lights your heart on fire, and then keep the little promises you make to yourself every single day. Day by day, moment by moment. Keep stacking wins, keep stacking days, and ultimately do what you say you're going to do. Because to get where you want to get, to do the things you want to do, to actualize your fullest potential, consistency is the only pathway there. That's number one. Number two is something I've stated a lot on this podcast, specifically over the last year, as I'm really in the trenches with some of my players. This has become a sort of a cornerstone of my mindset, and what I believe is be the best at getting better. That's number two. That's lesson number 2, is be the best at getting better. There's so many things in this life that we do not have control over. So many things. But there are a couple absolutely massive things that we do have control over. Our attitude, our effort, and our response. Those 3 things basically sum up everything that we have control over, right? In that is our choices and our focus and what we pay attention to and all of that stuff. But if we sum it down to make it as simple as possible, we have our attitude, our effort, and our response. Those are our most important things we want to dial in on, as those are the things that I focus on. And sum that all up is my daily actions, my daily targets have to be within my control. Now, I might have this far off vision and this path that I'm headed down, like that's my North Star. That's my massive transformative purpose, whatever that might be. But I know that day to day, my daily targets have to be within my control. Okay, so then what's my number one goal or number one target for each day? Well, what's in my control? To be the best at getting better. That's a Tom Brady insight that I absolutely love and have fallen in love with and have tried to hammer down into all of my players that I coach. Because if that can be your focus every single day, that means you are getting 1%, 1%, 1%, 1% better each day, and seeing that compound and aggregate over time through your consistent actions. Consistency and being the best at getting better go hand in hand. If I know that I'm going to put in the work every single day, and my number one goal is not to be the best in the world, to be a starter, to win championships, to have this result or outcome or whatever, it's just simply to be the best at getting better. There's nothing that's going to stop you from doing that, because that is in your full control. And then your foundational piece under that mindset is consistency. There's literally absolutely nothing that can stop you unless you just stop. So those 2 things, consistency and being the best at getting better, will absolutely change the trajectory of your life if you stick with it long enough, and know that there's going to be a lot of time in there that you are not rewarded for your efforts. You will not be rewarded for your efforts for a long period of time, but the fruits of your labor will come, and you will understand why you did what you did. You have to be willing to do that. And that moves me right into the third lesson, which is it's lonely work. It's lonely work. It really is. I know it from experience as a podcaster and all the other podcasters out there who've stayed up to the middle of the night trying to edit and record and post and do all of this shit all by ourselves because there's no team. I mean, I have a couple people helping me now. Shout out to Ben, video editor. Great, amazing, right? He's just my number one guy. So lucky that I don't have to do all of that stuff, but I have to do everything else. Guest reach, research, planning for the episodes, obviously recording them, posting them, creating content for them, all of that stuff. And it's lonely. And for a long time, especially with a podcast, you feel like you're literally talking to no one because you are. You're literally talking to the person that you may be interviewing, or if you're doing a solo episode, you're literally talking to no one and the couple people that may watch or listen, family members, close friends, people who actually want to support. And it takes a long time. Again, this is episode 265 of this podcast, and it's still very much underplayed and undervalued. And I'm still going to put in the work every single day, but it's lonely. I'm not rewarded for any of this. There's no monetary gain from putting in this amount of work yet, because we have to emphasize the power of yet. But it is lonely work. It's unrecognized. Nobody gives a shit that you're doing this. You have to do it because you want to actually do it. You're taking pride in yourself. You have a longer term vision of where you want to be. You're as consistent as humanly possible, and you're just trying to get better at your craft. Every time I record an episode, I'm just trying to get better at my craft. If you have any feedback for me, if you're a first time listener, or if you're a long time listener, give me feedback. How can I get better? How can we improve? What changes can we make? I love to hear it all. I've been an athlete my whole life. I love feedback. I don't care if it's harsh. I'll take it and I'll screen it, and I'll take all the stuff that I can use and I'll put into my practice of trying to be the best at getting better. But anything that you try to do that is amazing, that is extraordinary, that is elite, it will be lonely. It will be lonely. People will not understand. People will not get why you're doing this, why you're putting through so much stress and hard work to get this thing. Because you can't go through life without stress. It's unavoidable. So you might as well be stressed by the things that fire you up. And you use that stress as fuel to push you in the right direction. You make obstacles make you stronger. Why not? Why not do the thing that you have in your gut, this intuitive feeling that this is what you need to be doing? Yeah, it's going to be fucking hard. Of course it's going to be hard. Why wouldn't it be hard? Everything that comes in life is hard. It knocks you down, but how many times do you get back up? You fall 7, you rise 8. You might as well rise 8 for something that lights you up on fire, that gives you just the goosebumps every time you think about it, and you're willing to be lonely and consistent with that work until you do get rewarded for your efforts. But you're going to do it no matter what, even if the rewards never come, because you just love doing the thing. So just understand that when you're on this path to doing something incredible and really actualizing your potential, it's going to be lonely. You're going to lose some people along the way. They're not going to understand why you're doing what you're doing. But if you are intrinsically motivated by why you're doing the thing you're doing and where your longer term vision is, yeah, you might have days you feel like, damn, this fucking sucks. Have those days all the time. I'm just like, is any of this worth it? Why am I doing this? Why did I buy all this equipment and spend all this money and record all these episodes if no one's even going to give a shit? That's the path of being an entrepreneur. That's the path of doing anything that's great. There's always going to be doubt. Doubt is going to creep in your mind all the time. Fear is going to creep into your mind all of the time. You're never going to get to a place where you don't doubt yourself and you're fearless. What's going to happen is, as you continue to step forward into growth and step forward into growth and step forward into growth and step forward into your uncomfortable position and more and more and more, you do it more and over and over and over and over again, you're not going to get less scared. You're just going to get more brave. And you're upping your virtuous values of bravery and courage, And you're knowing that you're a person who is courageous, who is brave, and you can step into the unknown and still get after it. That's what you're teaching yourself from this lonely work and going on the path of achieving something that few others do. Not because we're more special. Everyone is incredibly special and unique and has the intrinsic value to go after something they want. But very few people do, because they don't want to put in the consistent work over a long period of time. They don't want to be the best at getting better. They want the reward right now. And that's just not going to happen. Last one, number 4, last lesson, for the love of the game. For the love of the game, you have to absolutely love the game. I played 2 games last night for a men's league. Why? Because I just fucking love baseball. It's an incredible sport. Baseball is the number one thing outside of my parents, who are absolutely incredible, that made me a man. I learned every lesson I could possibly learn on the baseball field, and then those lessons were reinforced by my incredible parents. Frustration, setbacks, loss, defeat, relationships, teamwork, cooperation, everything was learned on the baseball field. That's why I think youth sports are one of the most important things for our kids to be doing. I don't care if they become professional athletes. I don't even care if they play in high school. But youth sports will teach you so much about life that we have to be encouraging those people to do it. But that's a side tangent. I'm getting a little off track. Lesson number 4, again, is for the love of the game. You are not going to be consistent or do the lonely work or be the best at getting better if you're just not absolutely in love with doing the thing. This is something that I'm really trying to get across to my 15-year-olds that I coach. They get to play baseball in the summertime with no school and travel to different cities and states, play in Alabama and Houston and Atlanta. And sometimes they show up to the field a little sluggish. And I'm trying to reinforce to them from a 32-year-old guy who's been in their position that every time you get to step on a baseball field and play a game with your buddies, it's the absolute best day. It really is. And so trying to find that thing in them that makes them feel so fucking grateful for this game before it gets taken away from them. Because everyone's playing career comes to an end. And so how can we see in the moment? How can I create this little vision, this different perspective for them that while they're on the field, they absolutely love it. They're so grateful to be out there. And that eliminates this sort of life or death nature of putting so much pressure on ourselves because we just love doing the thing. Because yeah, when you get to college or you get to pro ball, it does become a job. And most guys lose that fun, loving nature of the game. So we can build that early in our players of like, dude, this is baseball. You chose to play here and you get to be here. This is an absolute privilege and an honor. Feel that in your bones. Feel that when you're out in the field. Feel that when you're pitching or in the batter's box. And the pressure dissipates and the love for the game comes. And now you're trusting your abilities. Now you know what you can do and how good you are and how much work you put in to be in this position. And you have so much faith in that moment that you can get the job done, that you're the absolute right guy for the job. That's how gratitude and optimism can help you enhance your performance. So getting guys to realize that you're playing this for a reason. You fell in love with this game for a reason. Always keep that in the back of your mind. The why. Why am I here? Why am I playing? That's right. That's right. I love this thing. I love my teammates and I love this game and I care about what I'm doing. That is for the love of the game. That will allow you to be as consistent as possible no matter what obstacles you face. That will allow your daily target to be being the best at getting better every single day. And now if you get to a really high level, you always have that feeling inside of you that, yeah, this is tough. This is a job. You know, if I don't produce results, I'm not going to be on the field. Yeah, I know those things are there, but they're not driving me. They're not driving me. They're not haunting me, and they're not creating me to play tight. What's driving me is the love of the game and knowing that I can find little small moments of joy and love even when it becomes a job. Even when it becomes high stress or high pressure, those little moments where I can have fun with my teammates or enjoy doing this thing that I love on the baseball field. Now, you can relate this to absolutely anything that you do in your life. I just relate it to baseball because, again, it was the number one thing that absolutely changed my life and made me a man. And now I'm coaching 15-year-olds and I'm trying to pass on those lessons to them. Now, maybe they won't realize it this season, or maybe not even next season, but maybe by the time they're juniors and seniors and heading off to college, they're going to realize some of the wisdom that I tried to bestow on them is actually accurate and true, and maybe then they'll apply it into their lives, or maybe they're applying it right now. But I'm only speaking from experience, because I'm someone who pays now to go play in a men's league, where I would give up. I give up my time all the time to go play in a league. And I love coaching. I give up my time to go coach. There's not a lot of money in coaching, but I do it because I absolutely enjoy seeing ball players be out there in love with the game. I want to pass on that knowledge and experience, and I just want to be around the game of baseball that taught me so much, that gave me so much. And now I say the same thing about podcasting. Again, undervalued, underplayed, underlistened is this podcast. That doesn't matter to me at all. I've had some of the best conversations that I've ever had on this podcast. I've been working on these solo episodes to be able to communicate my ideas in the most effective manner. It just helped me in all areas of my life. And I absolutely love doing this thing. And I'm going to do it until I literally can't do it anymore, for the love of the game. So I hope you can find what that is for you, because it's an absolute game changer to find that massive transformative purpose, or that wildly important target, that thing that lights you up on fire. And no matter how many obstacles or struggles or setbacks or challenges come your way doing that thing, you always get back up and press ahead, for the love of the game. For the love of the game. So to quickly recap those 4 lessons that I've learned from 4 years of podcasting: consistency, be the best at getting better, it's damn lonely, and for the love of the game. Thank you for tuning in. Here's to another 4 years of this podcast. I love and appreciate every single one of you for tuning in, for supporting, for doing whatever you do. Please share this with a friend, and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers. Thank you very much for tuning into that episode. And if you enjoyed it, click right here for another full-length episode of the podcast. And please don't forget to subscribe. But most importantly, above all else, please take good care of yourselves and others. And I'll see you next time. Lots of love. Cheers.